Parikh.
These videos are getting more and more tiring to produce every year. And you know, the real test of how I feel about doing those videos is, and it's been many, many years that we've been doing them really for fun. We bring our employees into it, they have a great time. I think when I started doing those videos, you know, my children were still young, and you know, my own ego, I felt like, wow, this is great. Now I look at them, and my teenagers are next to me, and college-bound children are next to me, and I'm embarrassed. But it is a lot of fun. Thank you all for coming. Today we're going to talk about a serious subject, and a subject that we made light of in that video, but very, very real as it pertains to our businesses moving into this next new generation of opportunity. We're calling it the end of globalization. Thomas Friedman promised us a flat world in 2000, and most of us spawned this industry on that dream. A perspective that was a simple one. We can live in a borderless society, we can move transboundary, and we can take advantage of resources and information everywhere. And we thought everyone was in on that game with us. Partnerships with China and Russia, partnerships in Africa, and beyond. But today, what we're seeing is a rise in conflict zones. Now, conflict zones are important for us as we establish captive centers, as we establish partnerships, as we build supply chains. And as organizations looking forward, what we see here is these conflicts very much around us. Nordics and Russia. Russia surveying the North Sea, making attempts to impact and disrupt electric power. We have conflicts, of course, with Ukraine and Russia that we're very familiar with. Conflicts recently between the US and Russia. When a Russian fighter jet circled the bases in Syria, there's a significant amount of conflict continuing there. China and Pakistan and the border regions of northern India, continuing conflict, and that conflict involving both border disputes and also armed militants. As we move forward and we make our way into the Southeast Asia, we see border disputes, also significant ones, between India and China. And of course, most recently, the claims that China is making on the South China Sea, impacting supply chains, making a risky place even riskier. Consider the recent threats on Taiwan. Consider what it means for our partners in the West, in South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, and elsewhere. These regions are becoming destabilized, and as these conflicts arise, I want you to appreciate that they're actually not in isolation of each other. When we look at this, initially we think these are independent events, but suddenly these independent events begin to look like something more. Now, I'm a product of the Cold War, and it makes perfect sense to me. There's a new Iron Curtain being built, and these conflicts are on the border regions of that curtain. Except this Iron Curtain is focused on trade, it's focused on business, and it's focused on creating essentially a friendship, as I call it, of convenience. What's the history behind this? And why does it even matter for our industry? Many of you may or may not know my background. I was a presidential appointee years ago. I started my life as a lawyer, a government lawyer, an enforcement lawyer. I spent much of my days thinking about such subjects. And the relevancy of it today in our business couldn't be any more great. From the British Empire and the Russian Empire imperialism, which is what we may be seeing today in Ukraine, expansionism, nationalism across the world, common ethnicity countries wanting to work and live together. And the patriotism of the Cold War re-emerging. The dream of globalization, what did we really want from that? We wanted to take Western businesses to a place where they could operate and work globally without any type of boundary. Regionalization, which is what we call it, doesn't mean the dream of innovation is over. We will argue today that the innovation will even move faster, but it's going to happen differently. What are the major trading zones emerging? You saw in my video, I was in Dubai. Well, I was really in Dubai when I took that video. I was meeting many of our clients there because the Middle East is becoming a pivotal region right now. It's the one place, actually, where you're going to see Russian, Chinese, and American investment side by side. Side by side. I met with several of the technology companies there, and they're involved in supporting supply chain clients in the region, so companies, oil companies, et cetera, shipping companies. And I asked them, what is the most important thing to you in this region? To keep freedom alive, to keep your businesses running, to keep the ships moving? You know what they said? Surprised me. The US Navy. And isn't it right on the top of the headlines with Iran seizing a Chevron ship? If you're wondering if any of this matters to you in business process outsourcing or IT, or if you're wondering if it matters to you as you try to commercialize your enterprise globally, it does. It couldn't matter more today than ever. Because where we choose to put our captives, who we choose to have as our business partners. You know, we've been big supporters of doing work in the Philippines, and we've negotiated many, many contracts over the years. Philippines has been a great partner for the West. But with what's happening in the South China Sea, can we count on that? I was at an aerospace and defense event just a week or two ago, and I met with several executives, CIOs and the like at that event. And you know what their big concern was? Secondary suppliers. We've been relying on Taiwan for chips and software. With the pressure being put on Taiwan from China, are we expecting some of the secondary suppliers now to come from China? How do we make sure that our intellectual property has a continuous chain of protection? How do we make sure that our networks are not being interfered with? Overnight, less than 45 days, every Western company and every American company was out of Russia after the Ukraine conflict. It was instant. So we do care. We do care, and I'm going to show you some additional data here. So what are these trading blocks? Well, what's happening in the South-South region? Well, the South-South region, for those of you that know, it's Africa, South America. There's talks about common currency, right? Brazil and Argentina, believe it or not, they want a common currency. We see the same thing, obviously, in the Eurozone and the power of the US dollar. This is troubling to the Sino-Russian region because their own currencies don't have international power, so they're pegged to the US dollar. How will that change or be impacted in the future? Let's talk about the regional blocks that I've disclosed to you and how we see those regional blocks, looking at the two major ones. The Western Bloc is focused on political and military alliances, focused on trade and economic motivations. There's expansionist strategy focus, technology and innovation, IP protection, and freedom of information. These are what I would call the pillars or characteristics of these regional trading blocks. And you can see here what the difference is between what we call the Sino-Russian bloc, right? Freedom of information and IP protection is the most important thing that we have in the West. We cannot run business without it. And if you think about the impact that fake news has had, interference with the elections has had, to the trust and confidence that we have in our businesses and the billions of dollars that it's cost our economy. What happens now in regionalization where we've cut off the Sino-Russian influence? Opportunity. You know, I'm a child of globalization. Probably one of the biggest optimists you'll ever know. I bought into the dream. We can still enjoy that dream, but it will be different. Our businesses were built on a dream of globalization, but regionalization will increase that velocity of innovation. We can trust our partners better. We can ensure that we have clearer trading routes, protected trading routes, not just with technology, but also the products and services that we move. Many of you have come to me as I've given elements of this presentation over the last few months and said, is China the enemy now? I wouldn't say that China is the enemy, but we must de-risk from China because we like our toilet paper. For those of you that remember what it was like in the pandemic with the runs on toilet paper, we Americans will never again be held hostage over toilet paper. And that means that our supply chains are going to be de-risked. And we're not only going to rely on China. It's very important. It's already happened. We know about Apple de-risking to India, moving manufacturing of iPhones there. We're seeing it in every industry, that even our own customers. That means new IT systems, new commercial models, and opportunities. So what is this prerequisite? What are the prerequisites to innovate in a regionalized model? Well, most importantly, supply chain reconfiguration. And this impacts all aspects of our business. Whether you're a technology company or whether you're a software business or you're in the aerospace and defense. We need to make sure that we're de-risking supply chain. And we need to make sure that we are able to protect, right, our intellectual property through that process. We need to diversify suppliers and geographies. As we de-risk from the Sino-Russian bloc, it might mean that we are completely eliminating ourselves from the Silk Road trading. Look, I'm not proud to say this. I thought very hard. We put a lot of research into this, and we cannot, in good conscience today, not advise our clients of the risks of continuing to do work in some of these areas. Currency stabilization is something very important to us, and we see it in an inflation-driven economy that we live in today. But yet the US dollar maintains steady, and this is very, very critical for our businesses to continue. Reshoring and nearshoring. We need to move more opportunity to new geos and new locations. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then, of course, the rise of friendshoring. We're going to choose to work with nations that we share values with. Imagine that. What does that look like? The adoption of common laws. Well, we're seeing it. If Argentina and Brazil believe they can have a common currency, they're willing to take their differences and put them aside. What did we see? Sweden now is making its new bid for NATO. New countries want to join the Eurozone. It's happening right all around us. The African Union is talking now about how it wants to bring African countries together in a way that will allow for better trade between them. This also means ease of migration between these countries for the first time. Nations that we've been concerned about, I predict, will have an easier time conducting business with each other because we share values. We are less concerned about being attacked or to be infiltrated from a technological standpoint from these locations. And we're seeing increased military and political cooperation. When I gave this presentation in India, the first thing that was asked of me was, if this is true, how do you explain Russia's historic military relationship with India, if India is in fact on the blue side of things? Well, in November of last year, after many years of joint military operation, the Indian Navy and the US Navy sailed in a joint operation into the South China Sea. Really upset China over that. But as we see the deconnection of military connection with India and Russia, we are seeing that build with the West as India is becoming a greater power with respect to Western relationships. So what are the industries that are benefiting the most? And we conducted this research to examine specifically on those same elements that I just shared with you. What are the specific industries and how they're benefiting from a sort of a low, medium, high scale because of regionalization? For aerospace and defense, this is fantastic because it means we close loop. It means that we eliminate the risk of our IP exiting the United States. How many of you saw pictures of those Predator drones coming out of Iran? If I close my eyes and open them, they look like General Atomic Predator drones, but they're not, right? They're some type of cheap imitation. Our friends are here from General Atomics. They'll probably tell you all the weaknesses in those drones. But the problem is our intellectual property is under attack, and in this regionalized model, we'll be able to protect it better. Energy and resources. The opportunity to invest in sustainable technologies without risk or fear of those technologies being taken or exploited will allow us to invest in more innovation. Financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, and travel and transportation, all seeing benefits from this opportunity. Friendshoring will enable us to accelerate innovation. Look at what the data is showing. This is based on actual client information and data. What are we seeing here? Of course, drop in Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, China, and Russia. Rise in US, Canada, Central Europe, Mexico, and California. California, that's where we are. Canada, India. So the exciting thing here is that we're seeing here is we're actually measuring, okay, where business opportunity is moving to. That's what friendshoring is doing for us. Now, I have a perspective on this. I think this is temporary. I think Eastern Europe, once that Ukraine war is over, that will rebound with a vengeance. Southeast Asia is challenging because that's unfortunate. What that shows is conflict in that region is keeping us out of our partner countries, Japan, Philippines, South Korea, etc. So that is concerning to see. Regionalization will bring imagination to action, the title of our event. And in this new reality, we will experience greater trust and confidence with more secure networks and broadband. For the last several years, I've been talking about the importance of having networks in place so that we can maintain not just the ability to work on a cross-border basis, but be able to communicate with even lower socioeconomic communities. Broadband access is an opportunity for every person in the world. I oftentimes talk about 4 billion people coming online that never had access to technology before, right? In the next 2 to 3 years. Substantial amount of impact. But that impact also today, when we talk about regionalization, means that we can secure our networks with partners that we trust. It means that we actually can be more likely to innovate with a common set of values. So, how many of you are familiar with Starling Lab? I have talked about this in past presentations. The Starling Lab is a collaboration with USC, the University of Southern California, and Stanford University. My youngest just got accepted into Stanford, and my oldest goes to USC. So somehow they had to be mentioned in this presentation. That particular exercise is able to identify any fake imaging happening online and instantly tell the viewer that this is fake information. Think about the power of that. Think about the power when we're able to utilize ChatGPT, for instance, and underlying technologies to be able to do the same, to be able to evaluate instantly the truth and veracity of the information put forward to us. It's coming. And how is that going to change how we live together across Europe, the United States? How is that going to change? Today, we are a world divided, even amongst our own countries. Right and left not talking to each other. A big part of that, I would argue, is because we're not looking at the same information the same way. What happens when we're able to detect the lies? It's coming, and this is going to be great for business. It's going to create a better working environment. We will also draw insights at an accelerated pace and make faster decisions. I've often talked about this notion of unbroken stream of thought. I spend a lot of hours working with our team on our research, on my own thought leadership. I feel it's very important that I remain relevant. An unbroken stream of thought. How many of you remember using the typewriter? I do. Typing. Oh, shoot. I made a mistake. Throw it away. Start again. That's a broken stream of thought. Or I have to stop because I have to go to the library and research something. Pick a book. Now I forgot why I was actually going to the library and my thoughts are broken. But with the access to not just information, instant information today, unbroken stream of thought means that while we're having a conversation, we'll be able to gather the data that we need to advance our thinking. Right? No more senior moments. Predictive analytics and digital assistants. Well, we've been talking about these also, but now they have a whole new meaning. Generative AI is taking this to a completely different level. You can now generate everything from an itinerary to Europe to a legal contract. I spoke to a CEO friend of mine. He runs a national linens company. He might be here today. And in that conversation, he told me, I get more out of generative AI than all the consultants I could hire. He runs a national business, right? Very, very exciting time. This also gives us the ability, as I mentioned previously, to have instant collaboration and inputs. Now we align that with broadband, and that can happen anywhere within our regional environment. All of these communications will happen over what we call digital air. Now, what's prevented us from doing this right now is really concerns over security. But now, in more closed and secure environments, we'll be able to take our data and information with us as we travel from our desktop to our car, to our office, to our planes, working instantly, without devices, with our information moving along with us. The opportunities are great. At some level, it's bittersweet. We started this discussion about regionalization, and the first thing I thought was, I'm not in a position to give this presentation anymore. Maybe 20 years ago, when I worked in the government. But it never could be more relevant to us today. Globalization promised us a unified world without borders. In many ways, it was a false promise. But with regionalization, we will innovate at an exponential pace with trust, building real partnerships, and building a real future. Thank you.